Hey everybody, Blake here, and today I'm taking a look at some of my favorite games for large player counts. For me, large player count is anything that plays 5 or more. Can play less than that, but should be able to play at least 5 players. So stick around, you're gonna see some party games, some social deduction games, and maybe some games that might surprise you. So with that said, let's get to it. Okay, so first, coming in at technically number 11, so we're just going to call it an honorable mention. I had to add this one on here. It is Bristol 13, Bristol 13, I think it's Bristol. But this one came into my life just recently. Very fun sort of racing game meets social deduction where you are among a group of players and you're trying to get your apple cart out of town before all the other ones. However, there is this bubonic plague that's spreading around and you don't know who's sick, and at different points you have to mingle and you could become sick, and once you become sick, your whole objective is to tank the game for the other players. It's not as aggressive as it sounds. Really simple, light dice chucker. Plays I think up to 9 players. Check it out. Okay, and now to the actual list. My number 10, I think the very first board game I bought, and just an OG in my collection, that is Dixit. I think most gamers have heard of or have seen Dixit. It is a party style game for 3 to 6 players, and I think it was, don't fact check me on this, but I think it was one of the first games to really use this abstract art system as a game. Others have really expanded on it, but Dixit was sort of really where it started. And it's a simple game where you have a hand of 7 cards that are these unique pieces of artwork. When you're the storyteller, you're gonna play your card face down, giving a story, a word, a phrase, a couple words, a noise to describe your card. The other players are then going to play a card from their hand that they think matches that story, and you shuffle them up, and the other players are trying to guess which one was the storyteller's card. Very simple, really fun game. Dixit. Next up is Codenames, a game that becomes an instant classic with so many people. I have taught this game to so many people who have immediately gone out and bought a copy afterwards because it is just such a brilliant idea of creating this grid of words. It's not a super thinky game. You definitely can have a little bit of analysis paralysis with this one compared to most of the other games on this list. But man, I mean, they're definitely milking it for all it's worth. I mean, I have 3 versions of the game myself. I think they're probably up to like, 256. But I mean, just such a solid game. It's one that I feel like I've played, probably 100+ rounds of it. And I'm usually still down to play a round of it at the start of the night or at the end of the night. So another one that I think will be on most people's list, Codenames. And my number 8 is a game that it pains me that it's out of print, and that's Shadow Hunters. It is a hit and roll, wouldn't really call it deduction, but light deduction game for up to 9 players, 8 players. And very simple game. You get a character, you're either a shadow, a hunter, or a neutral third-party character. And the shadows win by eliminating the hunters win by eliminating the shadows, and the third-party characters have unique win conditions of their own, like you win if you're the only character alive, or you win if you're the first one to die, or you win if you did XYZ thing throughout the game. And this one's really fun for folks who don't like bluffing. You do not have to bluff at all in this game. You're essentially just moving around a map, collecting items, hitting people, whether you know if they're on your team or not, and getting information. So there are these cards that you will pass to other players that will give you a piece of information about their character. Really fun dice chucker. I do know that they have reprinted it, but it's not totally the same. This one needs to make a comeback. So my number 8, Shadow Hunters. My number 7 is, I think, the first one versus mini game I ever played, and that is Not Alone. Another simple one in theory where you are either the creature or the hunted, and the hunted are the team, the creature is the one. And it is a game that really gives you that suspenseful, hold your breath, one versus all moments that I love. The all in this game have a hand of location cards 1 through 5. They all start with the same locations, and they'll each play one of those locations face down, and then the monster will hunt and choose a location on the board to go to. And so they're trying to choose where they think these hunted are going to go, and the hunted are going to these locations that will give them different things or different other cards in the game. But they have to be careful, because if they go to the place where the hunter, forgetting the names of these things, but if they go to the location where the one is, they don't get that item and they lose health, which helps the hunter get closer to their win condition. So really suspenseful one versus all. I love the simultaneous action, so there's very little downtime. The only downtime is either while the all are making their choice or while the one is making their choice, but it's very quick to play. Very, one of the most suspenseful one versus all I've played. That is my number 7, Not Alone. My number 6 is a game that needs no introduction. It is one that both gamers and non-gamers alike have probably played, or if they haven't played, maybe they've heard of it. Werewolf. So this is what I consider the OG social deduction game, and I know there are ones that came before it, but it is such a classic where you are either a villager whose goal is to eliminate all of the wolves, or you are a wolf who at night gets to wake up and eliminate a player from the game. And so using conversation and different voting methods, things people do during the votes, you can kind of try and deduce who you think is good and who you think is evil. It's one of the most pure social deduction games out there. I gained a new love for it during the pandemic. It's one of the few games that plays really well over Zoom, maybe arguably even better than in person, because it's slightly easier to get a group of 15 plus players to play. And it's how I got introduced to the Dice Tower. A huge shout out to Tom Vassell and my Dice Tower Werewolf friends. If you haven't played Werewolf and you happen to be in a room with 15 to 30 people, I suggest you give it a try. So my number 5, and this one barely made the list because it tops out at 5 players, but if you've seen my review of it here on the Dice Tower, you'll know I am just a huge fan of Attack on Titan: The Last Stand. So this is a one versus all dice chucker game where if you are the one, you're playing the Titan who's trying to devour the heroes, or you've got a few different win conditions, whereas if you are the all, you're playing one of the heroes and you're kind of diving around the Titan in the map trying to take down the Titan, and you have to do it in like basically one of 2 specific ways. But another pretty short game, pretty easy to teach. If you like dice chuckers, you're gonna have 4 people simultaneously chucking dice around the table. Whereas if you don't like chucking dice, you can play the Titan, where your whole turn are essentially playing cards from your hand. Another one that can have quite a bit of suspense, as it can come down to, the final turn or 2 where the heroes really have to roll certain things to accomplish what they need to accomplish and risk losing the game based on what they roll. And so my number 5 is Attack on Titan: The Last Stand. My number 4, and it is arguably one of my favorite pusher luck games, plays 3 to 8 players. It is Incan Gold. This is such a classic to me because it is so simple but so addictive. All you are doing is you are this treasure seeker who's exploring these ruins, and the way a turn works is you reveal a card, which is essentially a room in this ruins that you're going in, and all the players decide whether they are going to continue on to try and get more treasure or leave. And each card that you flip over either has an amount of treasure or a hazard, something dangerous that you encounter on your journey. And so you will always split the amount of treasure that's revealed among the amount of players who are staying in the ruins. And with each flip of the card, you could potentially gain more money. However, if you ever have 2 of the same hazard revealed, anyone who's still in the temple drops all their treasure and the round ends. So your goal is to get as much treasure as you can, but leave just before that second same hazard hits. So addictive. It's one of those roller coaster pressure luck games where people usually are kind of hooting and hollering whether they're winning or losing, because it's just these like dramatic moments, but it's so simple. Do you stay and try and get more, or do you go? Such a fun one. My number 4, Incan Gold. My number 3 is Deception Murder in Hong Kong. This is a social deduction hit and roll game for 4 to 12 players. And when I think of deduction games, I think one of the major issues is that they often involve bluffing. They often involve the player to have to lie to the other players. And there are a lot of folks who just get very uncomfortable with that. I've played games like Werewolf or The Resistance with folks who like start to get flushed when they're, caught, and it just really is uncomfortable. And so I always look for deduction games that can really fit any audience, and Deception Murder in Hong Kong is that. So in this one, you are either an investigator who's trying to solve the crime. I should rewind a little bit. So a crime has been committed and one player at the table did it. Everybody will close their eyes and the murderer will have a pile of cards in front of them, and from their pile they'll select, I think it's called a murder weapon, and evidence left behind. And one player is the forensic scientist, and they are the only person that you can trust for sure, because they're trying to help the investigator solve the case by placing these bullet tokens to give different clues to how this person has been murdered and what evidence was left behind. And the thing I love about this game is that if you are the murderer, it's not about lying. It's not about saying, oh no, you did it, you did it. And it's about making sense of the scientist's clues for how it could tie someone else to the murder. So if I'm the murderer, yeah, okay, it does make sense that maybe he's pointing to this over here, but it also points to this over there. And oh, it kind of points to that too. All it's about is rerouting the suspicion to sensible other clues. So Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, one of my favorite social deduction games, especially if you have a mixed crowd of people, some who can handle the bluffing and aggressiveness and some who can't. Give it a try. Number 3, Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. So my number 2, and this may be cheating a little bit because as of this recording, the game is not technically available. I haven't even played it in real life, but it is that good. It is Blood on the Clocktower. So this is a game that I also kind of found during the pandemic, as it is one that can easily play online. And essentially, they took Werewolf and they said, instead of having the majority of players be plain villagers who have no information, they're just basing it off of social reads, let's have every player or every character have a certain role that gets some kind of information. And so there is still the social deduction of you're having conversations and trying to figure out who's good and who's evil. Every player has some type of information, even if it's just the information of knowing who they are, knowing what their character is. And oh man, I have played dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of Blood on the Clocktower at this point, and I'm still not tired of it. And one of the other things that makes it a little different from some of these other deduction games like Werewolf is the lack of player elimination. So that's one of the things that really it started getting to me about Werewolf is, hey, if you know somebody's good at finding wolves, just kill them day one, regardless of whether they've said or done anything, and they're out. They can't affect the game in any way. They can't share any suspicions. In Blood on the Clocktower, when you die, you no longer have your character's ability, but you're still in it, so to speak. You can still have conversations, and you have one more vote. And so this game is also similar to Werewolf in that there's a day phase and a night phase. During the day phase, characters or players can nominate other players to be executed, and obviously the good players are trying to execute the evil players. The evil players are trying to get the good players executed. And you will vote to determine who you're going to eliminate. And when you die, you get one final vote. So you get to stay in, participate. There's so many characters, so many different scripts. It is a social deduction game with a bit more meat. So not for the faint of heart. It definitely is a harder game to dive into as opposed to Werewolf or Deception Murder in Hong Kong. But it is one that I'm so excited for its retail release. But even without it, I'm having so much fun playing it digitally. So my number 2 is Blood on the Clocktower. And my number 1, the one you've all been waiting for, if I could just pick one, it would have to be Just One. And I know that was corny, but listen, Just One is a super simple word game. It's totally cooperative. One player is trying to guess a word. The other players can write a one-word clue. Every player that writes the same word gets eliminated, or their word gets eliminated, and it doesn't get to be seen by the guesser. And so then you will reveal the words that are left, and the guesser tries to guess what it is based on the words that are left. And it is such a fun game because it makes you really think about, do I write down the most obvious clue? But oh man, Nancy over here is probably going to do that too, so maybe I should do something a little more unique to him. And but what if Michelle also does that? And so it's just a really fun game. It's cooperative, which I love a good cooperative game every now and then, and you can really play it with any group of people, not just gamers. It works. I've played it with coworkers, I've played it with family. It's gone over well every single time. And just like that, we made it through the list. Those are currently 10 of my favorite large player count games. As you can see, love deduction. I love party style games. I love games that just make you laugh, that you're not thinking too hard about. You're not solving complex algebraic formulas. You're just around a table with a bunch of people having a good time. So tell me which games make your top 10 list, or tell me if there's one that I blatantly missed that should be on everyone's. I'd love to know what that is in the comments below. But until next time, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.